told me they were up to Daf Lamed Zayin Gufa, 5 lines from the bottom. Makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. Fine. So let's hit it. Let's do it. So Gemara says Gufa. We had stated before, this was referenced before. Hey, Yosi ben Yoezer is Treda, that Yosi ben Yoezer is Treda had testified al Ayel Kamsa Dechain, on Ayel Kamsa, which is this type of grasshopper, Dechain. So what does Dechain mean? So Rashi, before I'd said that, that means that it's tar and it's mutter to eat. It's kosher to eat this type of grasshopper called an Ayel Kamsa. And on the liquid of the slaughterhouse in the Beis Hamikdash, that it's not mekabel tuma. That there was a lot of blood and water in where they would slaughter the karbanos. And in general, liquids are mekabel tuma. However, Yosi ben Yoezer testified that those liquids are not mekabel tuma. And then somebody who he touches a dead body, that he's tameh. They call it Yosef Sharia, and they called him Yosef the Permitter. So we're going to see the Gemara is going to ask about that. This line seems pretty much incomprehensible at first glance, because if you think about it, when we know that touching a mace, touching a dead body, that makes you tameh, that's deraisa. That can't be something that Yosef ben Yoezer instituted. And on top of that, that's being machmir. He's saying that you're tameh. So why does it make him a permitter? Why does that make him somebody who's mekel? So we're going to see what the Gemara is going to discuss that soon. But first, the Gemara discusses the first statement he said about the Ayel Kamsa, about the grasshopper. So Gemara says, my Ayel Kamsa. What's this Ayel Kamsa? What type of grasshopper is this? So Papa Amar Shoshiva. I'm sure that clarified it for everybody. It's a Shoshiva. Now, what is a Shoshiva? It's some sort of grasshopper with a long head. Rav Chia bar Ami Mishmei Ula Omar, Rav Chia bar Ami in the name of Ula, he said Sosvil. So also unclear what that is. I'm not sure what it is. Does anyone have translations for those two types of grasshoppers? I don't have an English Gemara, so
my arsenal is taking forever to boot up. I'll let you know if I see it.
Okay, fine. All right, so keep me posted. So fine. So we have a machlokas what this grasshopper is. Is it Shoshiva or a Sosvil? So Papa Amar Shoshiva, Papa says it's Shoshiva Kamifugi, and they're arguing Barosha Aruch by a grasshopper which has a long head. Mar Sava Rosho Aruch Aser. One person holds that if a long-headed grasshopper is Aser, Mar Sava Rosho Aruch Motor. So and Yosef ben Yoezer, he came along and said that if a grasshopper has a long head, that's Motor. So Rashi actually just brings down that it's a machlokas and drashas, that when the Torah discusses grasshoppers, there's a machlokas about how to darshan it. Is it that it has to be specifically exactly like the grasshoppers that are specified like in the Torah, or as long as it's similar in some capacity, then it's fine. So that machlokas is going to manifest itself in whether this long-headed grasshopper is asr motori, and Yosef ben Yoezer says fine. Just turn the page, Lam Zayin and Beis, Sosvil. It's a Sosvil. He says when it comes to a grasshopper with a long head, everyone agrees that's also. But here, the knop of Chofenes Rubo Aidet Chakim. They're arguing not about a long-headed grasshopper, but rather when you have a grasshopper which wings cover most of it, but exactly, like only by a little bit. One of the signs of a kosher grasshopper is that the wings have to cover most of it. Now, nowadays, really, I don't think we eat grasshoppers mostly. I mean, some Sephardim do, but we're not so, we don't really know the science so well. We don't have a Masorah for which ones are kosher, but there are certain simanim, are certain signs of kosher grasshoppers. And one of them is that the knafa of its wings have to be chovenes rubo, has to cover most of it. So let's say you have a grasshopper which its wings cover most of it, but like 51%. It's not like 80%, or it's 51%. If you look at it, you can't tell that its wings cover most of it. But if you measure it, you would be able to tell that its wings cover most of it. So is that enough? Does that qualify for the siman of the Torah of the wings covering most of it? So Mar Savar Ruba Koldu. So Mar Savar, meaning Yosef ben Yoezer, he held that, yeah, as long as it's a robe, as long as the rings cover most of it, that qualifies. That's fine. Umar Savar Ruba de Minkar Bainon. Whereas the people who argue with Yosef ben Yoezer, they said no. When the Torah says that you need to have the wings cover most of it, that means that you need to have a robe that's recognizable. You need to have a majority that's recognizable to the eyes. Just because if you take out your tape measure, it'll come out that's a drop more, a centimeter more. A centimeter is even big by a bug. I don't know. It's a tiny, tiny drop more. So that doesn't qualify. It has to be a robe that's recognizable. So, just to summarize, so basically we have two opinions of what Yosef ben Yoezer was coming to matir when it comes to this grasshopper. Is a grasshopper with a long head, which Yosef ben Yoezer would dash in the psukim a certain way to matter, or we're talking about this sosvil that has wings that cover just barely most of it, the robe, and is that okay? Okay. So let's go on. So the Gemara says, so this was the next thing that Yosef ben Yoezer mattered. The liquid of the slaughterhouse and the Beis Hamikdash, the blood, the water, dechein. Dechein is a little vague. It means that it's mutter, it's not tameh. So the Gemara is going to discuss the exact parameters of what dechein means in this context. So the Gemara says, my dechein, what is dechein? What does this mean? Rav Amar Dechein Mamish. Rav says it means Mamish Dechein, meaning it's tar totally. There's no tuma. Whereas Ushmul Amar Dechein Milatami Acheret, from making other things impure. Aval Tumas Atzma and Yishban. But it does have its own tuma. It does have its own impurity. That don't take Dechein too far. Dechein doesn't mean that it can't become impure in totality. Dechein just means that it won't make other things impure. So what does this machlokus boil down to? The Gemara says, Rav Amar Dechein Mamish. Rav says Dechein means Mamish. Really, it doesn't make other things impure, and itself doesn't become impure. Ksavar Tumas Mashkin D'Rabbanan. He holds that impurity when it comes to liquids is only D'Rabbanan. It's not D'Oraisa. It's just it's a rabbinic decree. The Chi Gaz Rabbanan Tuma B'Mashkin D'Alma. When did the Rabban decree impurity by liquids? That's by liquids alma, liquids in general. When it comes to the liquids of the Beit Bechaya, of the slaughterhouse and the Beis Hamikdash, the Rabbanan weren't goes there. In the Beis Hamikdash, the Rabbanan were a lot more mekel about a lot of different things. When it comes to Shabbos, when it comes to doing a shvus and Isser Rabbanan on Shabbos, they in the Beis Hamikdash, we know that there is no shvus. So this is included in one of the things they're more makel in, which is that they said that liquids, even though in general the Rabbanan were gozer and the Rabbanan decreed that it should be impure, in the Beis Hamikdash they said that it would not be. Shmuel says dechein lo tamei acherim. Dechein means that it won't make other things impure, other liquids impure. Avol tomas atzma and yesh behen, but it does have its own tuma. It just doesn't have the power to transfer tuma. Why does he say that? Ksavar, he holds tumas mashkin d'oraisa. He holds that tumas mashkin, the impurity of liquids, is d'oraisa. L'tami acherim d'Rabbanan. Only to transfer the tuma, that's d'Rabbanan. V'chi goes Rabbanan b'mashkin d'alma. When were the Rabbanan goes there? That was only by mashkin d'alma. Mashkin b'chaya lo gozer. So outside the Beis Hamikdash, the Rabbanan were gozer, and they said that liquids will make other things impure. But in the Beis Hamikdash, by the mashkin b'mit b'chaya, by the liquids of the slaughterhouse, so then they were not gozer. So basically, it boils down to that if something's d'oraisa, the Rabbanan can't go and change the din. The Rabbanan can't change the law of its d'oraisa. So if you say that liquids becoming tamei is d'oraisa, so that's going to exist in the Beis Hamikdash too. But if something's exera d'Rabbanan, if something's just a rabbinic decree, the Rabbanan could undo it, and the Rabbanan couldn't make exceptions. And to be even a little more precise, the Rabbanan they might have not decreed in the Beis Hamikdash to begin with. It's not like they're permitting their decree, but rather that they just never decreed in the Beis Hamikdash to begin with. But based on whether you say that the liquids themselves becoming tamei is d'oraisa, that determines the machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Rab says, no, everything's drabanan by liquids. All impurity by liquids is drabanan. And therefore, in the Beis Hamikdash, they themselves don't even become tamei. Shmuel, though, he says that no, the liquids themselves becoming tamei is doraisa, and therefore that can't become permissible in the Beis Hamikdash. Doraisa can't change. The Rabbanan can't do anything about doraisa. But transferring the toma, that's the Rabbanan, and that's what won't happen in the Beis Hamikdash. Clear? Okay.
Yes.
Let's see the next thing. Now the Yikra Misim Esav the Kollel Yosef Sharia. So this is the third thing that Yosef ben Yoezer had testified about, is that if someone touches a dead body, that he's gonna be tamei, he's gonna be impure. And because of that, they called him Yosef the permitter. Yosef Asr Mibayle, the Gemara asks. They're calling Yosef the permitter. If he's saying someone's impure, they should call him Yosef Asr. They should call him Yosef the forbidder. He's being more strict. And furthermore, what's Yosef ben Yoezer doing? This is Daraisa. There's a whole parsha in Chukas talking about becoming tamei meis. Anyone who touches on the face of the field a corpse from a sword or some sort of dead body, the Torah says that he's going to be yitma shavas yamim. He's going to be impure for 7 days. This is Daraisa. So what's Yosef ben Yoezer coming along and saying? Oh yeah, if you touch a dead body, you're impure. The Torah talks about it explicitly, and also this is not being makel. This is not being lenient. This is being strict. So the Gemara says, "Doraisa diikrav tamei diikrav tamei." Really, you're right. Doraisa, if someone touches a dead body, he's tamei. So what did Yosef ben Yoezer do? Diikrav b'diikrav tar, because Doraisa, if someone touches somebody who touched a dead body, he's tar. Someone who touches a dead body, he doesn't transfer the tumah to somebody else. But also Inu, they came along with Gozer and they were Gozer. They decreed Afilu diikra b'diikra. Rabbanan came along and they said that even if somebody who touched a dead body, he's also tamei. But also Iyuv okma deraisa. And Yosef ben Yoezer came along and he put it back on the deraisa. He came back and said that let's go back to the deraisa policy, which was that only if the person who touched the dead body is tamei. But somebody who touches the person who touched the dead body, he himself will be tar. So therefore, he really is being more lenient. He really is matching. Morning, nice to meet you. We're holding by Lam and Zayin and Beis, where we're a few lines past the 2 dots by Valdikra Lamisim Esav Kollel Yosef Sharia. The Gemara basically was asking. The Gemara, just a drop of a recap. Yosef ben Yoezer said that he said 3 things. The third thing he said was that if somebody touches a dead body, he's impure. And the Gemara says because of these 3 things he said, they called him Yosef Sharia. Yosef the lenient one, Yosef the permitter. So the Gemara asks 2 questions. Firstly, if Yosef is saying that somebody who touches a dead body is impure, that's not being lenient, that's being strict. You should call him Yosef the strict one. And number 2 is that what is Yosef ben Yoezer doing? That's doraisa. If someone touches a dead body, that's doraisa. So the Gemara just answered. The Gemara that we just read was that really, you're right. Really, if someone touches a dead body, that's tamei doraisa. But if someone touches someone who touches a dead body, that's tar doraisa. The Rabbanan came along and decreed that even that person who touches the person that touches the dead body is impure. And Yosef ben Yoezer came along and said that no, let's go back to the doraisa. And if someone is the second link in the chain, he didn't touch the dead body directly, he just touched the person who touched it, he's gonna be tar, he's gonna be pure. So then the Gemara comes along and asks, the Gemara says, Diikra b'diikra nami doraisa. So if someone touches someone who touches, if you're the second in line, that's also doraisa that it's impure. Doraisa who? Diksiv. Anyone who touches the tamei, anyone touches the impure one, yidma, he's going to be tamei. So how could Yosef ben Yoezer say that's okay? That's also doraisa. Amru Rabbanan kamei derava mishmei demar zutra beri derav Nachman. The Amar mishmei derav Nachman. Lam names over here. The Rabbanan had said in front of Rava in the name of Mar Zutra, the son of Rav Nachman, who had said in the name of Rav Nachman, doraisa diikra v'diikra b'chiburin to mashiva. The deraisa rule is, the deraisa law is that someone who's second someone who touched, that's only tamei for 7 days, right? In general, someone who's tamei mace, someone who touches a dead body, he's tamei for a 7-day tumah. And you need paraduma, it's a much longer process. So that's only if he's touching the person who's tamei mace when he's currently touching the dead body. So that person is like a conductor of electricity. He conducts the tumah from touching the dead body on one end, and he's touching the other person on the other end, and he conducts that tumas mace through him. So only in that scenario would the person be tamei for 7 days. But shelo b'chiburin, if it's not when he's currently touching the dead body, he's just in a state of tumah because he had touched the dead body. So then, if someone touches that person, tumas erev, he doesn't have a 7-day tumah. He has the much more lenient tumah of a tumas erev, tumah only to the evening. But also inu, and they came along, and they decreed, afilu shelo b'chiburin tumas sheva. The Rabbanan came along and they said that even if you're not currently touching the person who's tamei mace when he's conducting the tumah, he's not currently touching the mace, but he's just in a status of tumah because he had touched the mace. The Rabbanan said even over there, if someone touches him, you're going to be that person who touches the person is going to be tamei for 7 days. Have the stricter tumah. But also he came along, but okma daraisa, and he came along and said, let's go back to the daraisa, and therefore, if someone touches somebody who's only in a status of tumah, but he's not currently conducting the tumah of the mace, because that person is only going to have a tumas erev, he's only going to be impure toward the evening. He goes to the mikveh in the evening, he's good. But if somebody touches somebody while he is conducting the tumah, he is currently touching the mace, that person would become tamei for 7 days because that's the daraisa. Yosef ben Yoezer can't change that. The Gemara comes back and the Gemara says daraisa maihi. What is the daraisa? The pasuk says, someone touches a mace, someone touches a dead body, l'chol nefesh adam of any person, he's going to be impure for 7 days. Uksiv, and the Torah says, if anyone touches the impure person, Yitma is become tamei. That implies that seems the implication is that he's going to become tamei for 7 days as well, because it just leaves it without any specification. It's mashma. It sounds like that you're going to have the same level of tumah as the person that the Torah was just describing, as the person that just touched the dead body himself. Uksiv, and the Torah says, the soul who touches, meaning he touches the conductor, tidmar arv, he's going to be impure until the evening. So this seems to be a contradiction. On the one hand, the Torah is implying that if someone touches a dead body, if someone touches the person who touches the dead body, he's going to be impure for 7 days. But on the other hand, the Torah is specifies that if someone is the second in the line of tumah, he's going to be only tamei till toward the evening. So how is this? Kan b'chiburin, kan shelo b'chiburin. That the pasuk which implies that he's going to be tamei for 7 days, that's by chibur, and that's when he's a conductor of tumah. That's when he's touching the mace currently and conducting the tumah to the other person. However, when the Torah says he's going to be tamei only toward the evening, that's shelo b'chibur, and that's when he touches somebody who's just a conductor, who's in the status of tumah, but is not currently touching the dead body. And Yosef ben Yoezer came along. He said that let's leave it on the daraisa, and that's the way it's going to be. That distinction between the tumas erev and the 7-day tumah. Amalu Rava. So Rava told, who was it? The Rabbanon who were saying in the name of Rava, the name of Nachman. So Rava said to them, Lava minilchu, did I not tell you? Lo tislu be boki sriki brav Nachman. You shouldn't be tola. You shouldn't put empty bottles. I think that's the translation. Boki sriki brav Nachman. That's a way of depicting that Rava's not happy with what they're saying. Now, it's not because the halacha they're saying is not true. The halacha they're saying is true. Rava just thought that Yosef ben Yoezer never mattered that. He never said that there's no tumah shiva, there's no 7-day tumah for somebody who touched a dead body. So he said that's not what Rav Nachman was saying. So hochi Rav Nachman. This is Rav Nachman was saying. Safek tumah versus Rabim hitrle. That if let's say you have a safek tumah in Rosh Hashanah, let's say somebody touched something which is unclear if it's a doubt to us if it's tamei. We don't know its status. It could be tamei, it could be not. So Yosef ben Yoezer told us that in that scenario, if it's Rosh Hashanah, that's mutter. It's tar. The rule in general is that Savik Tama versus Hayachid, we learn out from Sota that it's Tameh, but Savik Tama versus Rabim, not just when there is a Chazaka, there's a status that's tar, a previous status, but even when there's no Chazaka, it's also going to be tar. And that's why Yosef ben Yoezer came in Matter. So, and that's why again, coming back to the questions were that, hey, we're calling Yosef the permitter. He should really be Yosef the one who makes it who forbids things, because he was saying that simply what he was saying was that if anyone touches a dead body, he's tameh. So now we're saying that no, that's not what Yosef ben Yoezer was saying. What Yosef ben Yoezer was saying was that only somebody who touches something that's vadai impure is impure. But if someone touches something which is suffix impure, he's not impure. So that's why he's permitting. That's why he's being lenient. That's why they're calling him Yosef, the lenient one. And also that's why he's not going against the Doraisa. So the Gemara asks, that's not Yosef ben Yoezer. We learn this out from Sota. Ma Sota Rishus HaYachid, Af Tumah Rishus HaYachid. By Sota, we see that suffix Tumah is going to be Aser. That's only Rishus HaYachid. Because Sota is Rishus HaYachid. And that's where suffix Tumah is Aser. So too, every Rishus HaYachid Tumah is Aser. But Rishus HaRabim Tumah is Mutter. So what's Yosef ben Yoezer coming and telling us? Nice to meet you. My name is Shmuli Stern. I'm a substitute Daf Yomi giver for the next 2 weeks. No problem. So we're holding by how do I describe it? Like 10 lines up from the bottom of the narrow lines on Lamed Zayin and Beis.
B3.
Yeah. 37B. So fine. So again, we're trying to say right now that when Yosef ben Yoezer said that if somebody touches the dead body and he's impure, and the Gemara because of that, it's calling him the lenient one. So we're saying that what he was trying to say is that only if someone touches something which is vadai, which is for sure impure, is he impure. But Yosef ben Yoezer was saying if someone touches something which is a doubt, if it's a suffix, if it's impure, then he's going to be tar, he's going to be pure. So, and that's why they're calling him the lenient one. So the Gemara is asking, is that 1 second? But we learned that out from Sota. That's not Yosef ben Yoezer. Where will you know that from Sota? So the Gemara says, no. You know what Yosef ben Yoezer was saying? He was testifying in response to Rav Yochanan. Because Ha'amar Rav Yochanan halacha ve'imorinkin. Rav Yochanan said, you're right. The Raisa, really, anyone who touches something which is impure, which is a suffix, whether it's impure, it's a doubt whether it's impure, Rosh Hashanah, the Raisa, I'm sorry, Rosh Hashanah, the Raisa, that is pure. You won't have to worry about it. But we don't tell people that. If people come and consult with us and they say, I touched something, I'm not sure if it's pure or not. Am I tameh or tar? So we tell them, it's really better to go to the mikvah. It's better to purify yourself. He came along, Yosef ben Yoezer, what he did was that he did tell people, he did publicize this halacha. And that's why they called him Yosef ben Yoezer the lenient one, because he was being more lenient and he was telling people the real din, which was that the real halacha is that if someone touches something which is a doubt, which is if it's impure or not, it is, the halacha is that he is pure. Tanya Nami Hachi, Rav Brisa like this as well. Rav Yehuda Omer, Rav Yehuda says, Koros Na'atz Lahem, they put beams, they put signs to depict where's Rosh Hashanah, where's Rosh Hashanah. But Omar Ad Kam Rosh Hashanah, they had these wood pegs in the ground and said, here Rosh Hashanah ends, here's Rosh Hashanah starts. And the purpose of that was so that people would know if they touch something which is impure, or something, well, if it's for sure impure, they're definitely going to be impure. But if they touch something which is a doubt whether it's impure, so really it depends on the boundaries. This Rosh Hashanah versus Rosh Hashanah. He also came to Rabbi Yanai, but when they came in front of Rabbi Yanai, Amar Louis said to them, there's water at the bottom of the river, go and immerse yourself. He was more like Rabbi Yochanan, which he wouldn't tell people that, oh, it's okay, tell them the real halacha. And the reason why we don't hide the real halacha, it doesn't make so much sense to hide the real halacha. In this context, the reason why they would do that is because the rabbis were afraid if they would tell people this lenient halacha, people would take it too far, and people would say they're okay even when they touch something which is for sure impure. So therefore, Rav Yochanan and Rabbi Yanai, they felt, okay, if someone consults with us, we're going to tell them, you should go to the mikvah. That's the right thing to do. But Yosef and Yoezer said, no, we're going to tell them the real halacha, the Torah status of the halacha, which is that if you touch something which is a suffix tumah, that whether it's tamim or shesarabim, you're tar, you're pure. Okay, so that's the Gemara is now finished discussing Yosef ben Yoezer's halacha. So we're starting a new thing now, talking about you see v'ashlakos. Time for Menani Mili Amar Chia. Yeah. Okay. So basically, this is referencing back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah was discussing many different things, which are from Goyim, which they're also for you to eat, but it's not also to get benefit from. So one of them was cooked items. Shlokos are boiled items. This is a major halachic discussion. There's something called bishul akum in general, which means something cooked by a non-Jew, has major ramifications in halacha, and we're going to see what the Gemara says about it. So minoani mili, where do we know that something cooked by a non-Jew is asr? That's forbidden to eat. Which again, it's forbidden to eat. It is mutter to get benefit from, but asr to eat. So where do we know it from? Amar Rav Chia bar Abba, Amar Rav Yochanan, Amar Kra. Rav Chia bar Abba said, the name of Rav Yochanan, that the pasuk says, Ochal ba'kesav tashbirini ba'chalti, umayim ba'kesav titin li v'shasisi. So now I actually think this is this week's parsha. This is a nice coincidence. This week's parsha, which is that when I think it's describing when Klal Yisrael, when the Jewish people wanted to pass through the land of Esav, I think, and they said that we'll buy food off of you, and we'll eat it, and we'll buy water off of you. We'll buy water off of you, and we'll drink it. So the Gemara says that the Torah seems to be comparing food to water of Goyim. So kamayim, ma mayim shlo nishtanu, just like water is unchanged, so too food has to be unchanged. But if it is changed, if it's changed through a guy, if a non-Jew changes it, it's going to be forbidden to eat. So Gemara asks, 1 second, you're telling me that if food becomes changed through a non-Jew, that's forbidden to eat. But according to that, if you have kernels of wheat, and a non-Jew turn them into kloyos, which is basically you put them into an oven and you dry them out. It's not ground up. It's not cooked with anything else. It's just dried up and crunchy kernels of wheat. So if that's changed, so according to what you're saying, it's going to come out that it's going to be also it's going to be forbidden if a non-Jew is the one who put it in the oven and cooked it. And if you say, okay, fine, what's the big deal? Yeah, okay, it's usher. That's not allowed. But if a non-Jew has wheat kernels and he makes them into kloyos, he makes them into dried out wheat kernels, he puts them into the oven, dries it out, it's mutar. So based on what you're saying, it's going to come out that it's also it's forbidden, but the Brisa says that it's mutar. So that can't be the drasha. So Gemara says, okay, let's modify it a little bit. Ela kamayim, rather it's like water. Ma mayim shlo nishtanu mibriyosan. Just like water doesn't change from its original form, it's always in its original form of water. So too, food, it has to be unchanged from its original form. So kloyos, dried out wheat kernels, that's still a wheat kernel. It looks the same, it's just dried out. It just the liquid's out. So that would be mutter. But most things that are cooked, they're changed from their original form, and therefore that would be also. So Gemara says, Alamayata, but according to what you're saying, let's say a guy took wheat kernels, and he ground them up, he turned them into flour. That's going to turn out that's asur, because that changed from its original form. If you're going to say, yeah, you're right, that is fine. But wheat kernels that got turned into kloyos, into the dried out wheat kernels, and different types of flours. One's a more fine flour, one's a more flour with some more pieces. So mutter, that's mutter. So the Bryce is saying explicitly that's mutter to have flour made by a non-Jew. But according to the way you're making the drasha right now, the Gemara is making the drasha right now, if it's not in its original form, it should be also. So Gemara says, no, elokamayim, rather like water. Ma mayim shlo nishtanim b'briyosan, or just like water doesn't change from its original form through fire, ap ochel shlo nishtanim b'briyosan, or just like, so too food, the food from the non-Jew is only mutter when it's not changed from its original form through fire. So if it's changed through its original form, not through fire, like you grind up a wheat kernel, that's fine. Or if it's not changed from its original form, but it was put in a fire, like kloyos, like the dried out wheat kernels, that's also fine. It's only also to eat when it's changed from its original form through fire. So Gemara says, Midi Orksiv, does the pasuk say anything about fire? Once you're modifying the drasha this much, we don't see any indication of this in the pasuk. All the pasuk just says is that I'm going to eat food from you and comparing it to water. The Torah doesn't indicate anything about fire. So how can we take the drasha this far? So Gemara says now on the top of Lamachesam and Aleph, on the top of 38. So Ela Midrabanon, rather it's Midrabanon, rather it's the Isser to eat something cooked by an Anju is Drabanon. It's a rabbinic decree. Ukra on the pasuk asmachta ba'alma. This pasuk is just not asmachta, which means it's not a real drasha, but the pasuk provides some basis for this rabbinic decree. There are a lot of times there are certain things hinted to in the Torah that the Rabbanon base their decrees on, and this is one of them. So what's the reason for the rabbinic decree? So Rashi over here actually says the reason is that the Rabbanon were gozer that not to eat the food of a non-Jew, so as not to hang around them, and they might end up giving you something which is really not kosher. Without you realizing, they might slip you something which is not kosher. And therefore, the Rabban decreed and said, you can't eat anything cooked by a non-Jew. Toz is a little bit bothered by this Rashi because earlier we spoke about the decrees of wine touched by a non-Jew or wine made by a non-Jew, and we also spoke about the decree of pas akum, which is bread baked by a non-Jew, which is a lot more leniencies in halacha. But those decrees were the Rabban decree because we don't want you hanging around the non-Jew because we're afraid that you're going to end up marrying their daughters, which is usher. So Rashi over here seems to be saying something different, which from before, which is that we're afraid they're going to give you something not kosher to eat, which is also true. Toz is just bothered by why Rashi is switching. My theory is Rashi might be explaining it differently here because earlier when we were just talking about the Rabbanan decrees of not to hang around because we're afraid that they're going to marry off their daughters to you. The Rabbanan, there was no asmachta. Over here, there's an asmachta. So it seems like a little bit more serious Rabbanan decree. So that might be why Rashi feels it's a little bit different. I'm not sure. But both reasons are true. That Bishul Akum is usher because of A, we're afraid they're going to give you something which is not kosher. And B, we're afraid that we don't want you to get so friendly with them, because that might lead to you marrying their daughters. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the parameters of Bishul Akum. Very, very nogei halacha l'maaseh. It's very practical, these halachas. It comes up all the time. So Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak said in the name of Rav, anything which can be eaten when it's raw, and meaning a lot, you eat when it's raw, you cook it also, but if it's not something that needs to be cooked to be edible. So ein bo mishum bishul akum. There is no bishul akum to it. It's not usher if a guy cooks it. So any fruit, anything like that, obviously something which is meat, something like that, that can't, if it's cooked by a non-Jew, you can't eat it, but anything which could be eaten raw, non-Jew cooks it, that's fine. Okay, so these type of things are a big discussion actually. There's a big discussion when it comes to tuna about because is tuna something that could be considered, can you consider that something that could be eaten raw or not? So people do eat tuna raw in sushi and things like that. People eat like tuna. Yeah, right. But most people don't eat tuna raw. So let's say you have tuna made by a non-Jewish company and they're cooking it, is that permitted to eat or not? So it's a major discussion on halacha. But the basic rule is anything which could be eaten raw, no bishul akum, that's fine. But that's not really cultural. It could be eaten raw. If it can't be eaten raw, that there is bishul akum for that. The surah masnu haki. So this is what they taught in surah. The Pumpadisa masnu haki. In the city of Pumpadisa, they taught it this way. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Amar Rav. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak said in the name of Rav, a different version. Anything which doesn't go on a king's table to accompany his meal with his bread, so then there's no bishul akum. If it's not a like a prestigious food that would go on a king's table, there's no bishul akum for that. So
this is from the Rambam. That's the Rambam halacha.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, the Rambam brings down his halacha from the Gemara. So yeah, right. So this is the original source. So my benayu, what's the difference between these two versions of the leniencies by bishul akum? Is there any nafkamina? Is there any practical difference? So iki benayu, the Gemara says there's a few cases where this can make a difference in. Number one is dogim ktanim, small fish. So Rashi says that all these things, these three things we're about to list, these things, they can't be eaten raw. So therefore, if you have the first version, they would be a problem bishul akum. They would be usher if a guy cooks it. But these things are not. They're not so distinguished. They're not such like prestigious food, and therefore they don't go on a king's table, and therefore there would be no bishul akum according to the second version. So number one is small fish. Number two is ardi, which I don't know what it is. Rashi translates it into French. I don't know what it is. If anyone has an art school, you can help me out.
American mushrooms.
Mushrooms?
Yeah.
Okay, mushrooms.
Small fish, mushroom.
Okay. And the last thing is daisa, which is a type of oatmeal, type of cooked grain. So all these things can't be eaten raw, but they don't go on a king's table. And therefore, according to the first version, there would be a problem bishul akum. According to the second version, there's no problem bishul akum. Tosfos points out over here that the Gemara is only giving nafkaminas. The Gemara is only giving practical differences, which are forbidden according to the first version, and are lenient and are mutter are allowed according to the second version. The Gemara doesn't give things the other way, even though there are things that do exist that are forbidden only according to the second version. There are things like Tosfos gives an example of cheese. Cheese is olal shulchan malachim. Cheese is eaten on a king's table, but could also be eaten raw. It doesn't have to be cooked. Something like honey also go on king's table. Could be eaten raw. Could also be cooked. So those things, according to the second version, would be forbidden if a guy cooks it. But according to the first version, would be okay. But the Gemara is only going one way. So Tosfos says the reason for that is because the Gemara is only highlighting to us things which the second version, based on the second version, now it's going to be mutter, because the Gemara feels halacha l'maisa when it comes to the practical halacha, we pass in like both, not to be machmir, not to be stringent, rather to be lenient. That we're only going to forbid bishul akum when you have both things, when it's both A, can't be eaten raw, and B, also will be eaten on a shulchan malachim, will be eaten on the king's table. If one of those requirements is lacking, then there's not going to be bishul akum. So therefore, even halacha l'maisa nowadays, if something's cooked by a non-Jew, even if it can't be eaten raw, but it's not such a distinguished food, which that okay, fine.
Rice, you think that, yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure. Right.
It's on.
So don't ask your local Orthodox rabbi about how to apply this halacha l'maisa. But this is the rule in general. But there's a lot of this. Don't base this off of your own judgment. But halacha l'maisa, you need both, and therefore it goes the other way too. If something's not so distinguished, but it can't be eaten raw. If something is distinguished, but it can't be eaten raw, that also would be mutter if a guy cooks it. It needs to be both for it to be aser. Okay, let's go further. Amar Rav Asi Amar Rav. Dogim ketanim meluchim, small salted fish. Ein be'em mishum bushulei akum. There's no bishul akum when it comes to it. So this is when a Jew already salted it. So when a Jew salted it, the salting it, that cooks it to a certain degree. It's cooking a different method. It's not through fire, not through a heat source, but it's through salting. And now if a guy cooks that further, that's not called cooking, and that's fine. Tosfos is bothered by over here that, what do you mean? We already said small fish is mutter even without it being salted. So Tosfos says you have to say that when the Gemara is talking about small fish here, we're talking about medium-sized fish. It's on the smaller end, but not actually small fish, because that would be mutter even without it being salted. Amar Rabbi Yosef says in Tzlan Ovi Kochavim, if a guy roasts it, a Jew can use it for an erev tavshilin. An erev tavshilin is something that is a type of erev that you make when Yom Tov is Friday and Shabbos is connected to Yom Tov, and you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov for Yom Tov. You can't cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. And erev tavshilin makes it permitted. If you start cooking on Friday, which is Yom Tov, for Shabbos through an erev tavshilin, then you could continue cooking for Shabbos and you continue your Shabbos preparation, because obviously you can't cook on Shabbos. So Rav Yosef is adding in that if a guy is the one who roasts this salted fish, a Jew could use it for his erev tavshilin. The avdinu ovikochim kasa daharsana aser. But non-Jew makes it into kasa daharsana, which is this type of food which you take the fish and you fry it in fish fat, and you take flour, so it's like breaded salted fish and fish fat. So that's gonna be aser. So Gemara asks pshita, that's obvious. Of course that's gonna be aser, because now you're also cooking the flour. So if you cook you're cooking it. So it's over here. We're not just talking about the salted fish anymore. There's the flour is being cooked as well, and therefore it's obvious that that's gonna be aser. So Mao the same harsana ikr. You might have said that the harsana is the ikr that the fish and the fish fat, that's the main thing, and therefore there won't be bishul akum kamash malon kim koyaser. So therefore, Rabbi Yosef is coming and telling us that no, the flour is the ikr. So this is also translates into an interesting halacha lamaisa, which is that even if a guy cooks something and he's cooking something which in and of itself, if he was cooking it, that would be forbidden based on bishul akum. But if it's a mixture and the main ingredient of the mixture, the main thing, the ikr, is something which bishul akum doesn't apply to, so then even though the tuffle, the secondary ingredient is something which bishul akum applies to, that would be fine. Which also, before applying this halacha l'maisa, ask a rabbi how to apply it. But it is interesting. It's not just that bishul akum applies to anything which is cooked by a non-Jew within the parameters I said before. If it's a mixture and it's a secondary ingredient, it's not the main thing. That's going to end up being mutter. That's what we see based on this Gemara, based on this Havamin over here. Okay. The Gemara goes further. Amar Bruna Amarav Ovi Kochavim Shehitzis Or Ba'agam Koch Hagavim Shaba'agam Asur. Let's say you have a non-Jew which lit a swamp on fire. It's a wildfire, and all right, thank you for coming. So he lit the swamp on fire. So now all the grasshoppers in the swamp are now toasted. Now grasshoppers do not require shchita; they do not require to be slaughtered. Now we don't, like I was saying before, we don't eat grasshoppers nowadays. We're not familiar with the proper simanim, the proper signs which make them kosher. But there are certain grasshoppers which are kosher, so and they don't require shchita. So Rab's saying is that if you light it on fire and they're all toasted now, they're all usher. So the Gemara says, one second. What's the case? If the case is where you don't know which ones are the kosher ones, which ones are the tamei ones, they're all burnt, you have no idea. So my iriyovi kochavim afi Yisrael nami. Why is Rav Bruna Marab saying that if a guy lights it on fire, it's usher? If anyone lights it on fire, it's usher because you have no idea which ones are kosher. You can't just eat it; you don't know. So that can't be what he's saying. So Ella, it must be a case where you do know that which ones are kosher, but rather mishum bishulei v'kochavim. He's saying that's usher because of bishulei akum, because of bishul akum. He cooked the grasshoppers. Indirectly, he wasn't directly cooking it. He didn't like put the grasshoppers in a pot, but he lit the swamp on fire and he cooked them. So the Gemara says, one second. Kia gavna mi usher. It's such a scenario usher because of bishul akum. Is that usher? But va'amar Rav Chanan bar Ami, Amar Rav Pedos, Amar Rav Yochanan. But Rav Chanan bar Ami, in the name of Rav Pedos and the name of Rav Yochanan, Hai ovi kochavim decharich reisha. If he like burns a head, he takes a head of an animal and he tinges it to take off the hair. If he's trying to get the hair, he's not trying to cook it. He's just trying to take the hair off of the head of the animal. Shari lemecha minei. A Jew's allowed to eat from it. Afilu meireish one, even from the tip of the ear. Now the ear, which is since it's cartilage, it comes cooked very easily, and therefore just through tinging it with a little bit of fire, it's going to become cooked. And but even so, it's mutter. So why? Because the Gemara says, he's not trying to cook, he's just trying to get rid of the hair. And when a guy is not trying to cook, he's just cooking indirectly through heat, but not because his intention is to cook, he's just trying to take off the hair. That's fine. So Hochanami here also, where he's not trying to cook the grasshoppers, he's trying to clear the swamp, he's trying to drain the swamp. Nowadays that's used more metaphorically, but this is literally draining the swamp. He's lighting it on fire. So that's, he's not trying to cook the grasshoppers, so that should be fine. That should be mutter. So how could we say that's also? So the Gemara says, really, we're talking about a case where he doesn't know which ones are tar and which ones are tummy. So if so, the Gemara was bothered by, if we don't know, if that's the case, then why are we specifying a non-Jew? Even if it's a Jew lights a swamp on fire, the grasshoppers are toasted, you don't know if it's kosher or not, you can't eat it, you don't know if it's kosher. So why are we specifying a non-Jew? So really, the reason why we specify non-Jew is because that was the story. It was an incident that happened. That's why I specified non-Jew. Not because halacha l'maisa there's anything special about being a non-Jew. That's just what happened. But really, we're saying it's also because it's unclear if it's kosher or not.
Okay, not to divert it, but at what point did we lose the knowledge of the simanim for the?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. It happens to be that a lot of Sephardim, there's certain Sephardim that still have Masorah for it, and they eat grasshoppers. But I'm not sure.
They must have a simanim.
Yeah. Yeah, Sephardim a lot of times have a much more like unbroken Masorah. So they have Ashkenazim. There's a lot more moving around in Europe, different places. A lot of things get lost. But yeah,
not that I want to.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not so appealing to me.
But it seems like in this Gemara,
yeah, in the Gemara's time, they definitely knew the Simanim.
They knew because it sounds like he didn't know which ones were kosher or not from here, though.
Right. There are certain Simanim that like we were speaking about before, like if it's has like a certain amount of legs, if its wings cover most of it, there are certain Simanim, but we can't identify it exactly. But yeah, it doesn't affect my day-to-day life that much.
You're gonna have exactly
right. Okay, the Gemara goes further. The Gemara says, Gufa. We stated before, Omar Rav Yochanan, Hai Ovi Kocham Techar Reisha, that Ovi Kochavim which tinges the head of an animal, Shar Lemechel Mene Afilim Reish One. It's mutter to eat from it even from the tip of the ear. Omar Avina Hilkov, Hai Ovi Kochavim, that guy, Deshada Sichsa Lasuna. He put in some sort of like vessel, it's like a peg into an oven, he's trying to harden it. The cover by Yisrael, Kara Meikara. A Jew had put a gourd into the oven from originally. Shaper dummy. So the guy is lighting the fire, but he's not trying to cook. He's just trying to harden his earthenware vessel, this peg. But now the gourd memelo gets cooked. That'll be mutter. So pshito, this is obvious. This is exactly what Rabbi Yochanan said. How are you applying it further? You're applying a different scenario and saying it's mutter, but that's obvious. I can make the application myself. So now the same his intention is to cook the vessel. That's not called cooking, meaning that the Gemara, I would have thought that that's called cooking, and therefore, since that's called cooking, so he right now is cooking that, and including that is he's going to be cooking the gourd. So Kamashmal, the Gemara is teaching us that no, that's not called cooking, and therefore it's only that's a different process, has a different shame to that process. And therefore, the gourd is being cooked, but only memela, not through the non-Jew. The non-Jew is doing a different process, and therefore it will be mutter. Okay, let's hold it here for today. Yashakach, everybody. Thank you so much. Nice to meet everybody.
Yashakach, very nice. Thank you.
Sure.